Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Showcase series presented by IoT for All, the number one publication and resource for the Internet of Things. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon. On today's episode, we have Brian Saab, CEO and founder of Unearth. You have probably heard from Brian before. He's been on a couple of our other series, and we've done some great content together. And we're going to focus today's conversation around their OnePlace software that has been developed to help contractors and utility companies across the country. And yeah, that's what this series is about, showcasing ways that IoT is being used in the real world, solutions that are out there that you can yourself adopt, assuming obviously it's a fit for your industry and your company or your potential clients. So that's what we're going to dive into. We're going to talk about kind of how the solution works, what value it provides for the industry, why it exists, challenges that they're seeing in the space, how to adopt ROI companies are seeing by utilizing these types of solutions, and things like that. So all in all, fantastic episode to learn more about a great solution for potentially your industry out there. So please enjoy this episode of the Showcase series. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for taking time to chat with me today. I appreciate it.
You got it, Ryan. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Let's kick this off for our audience who maybe has not seen previous content we've done together. Let's have you do a quick introduction about yourself and an overall view of the kind of the company and what y'all do in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brian Saab. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Unearth. We're a mobile GIS platform, and we serve the built environment. So what that really means is that we provide our software to the folks that jump into trucks and put on hard hats and sort of build all of the infrastructure that makes our society possible. We say mobile GIS. What that really means is that our product works in an office environment, but really sort of shines out away from the office. So when someone's out in the field, and that means that our software runs both on desktop computers as well as on mobile devices, including in some connectivity challenged environments. Essentially, they can run offline. So it sort of bridges the office to the field and shares information back and forth.
Fantastic. So today, for the Showcase series, we're going to talk about your OnePlace software and kind of how it's being used by contractors, utility companies around the U.S. But before we get into that, I wanted to kind of set the stage for what the current landscape looks like, and how IoT is playing a role in the industries that your software will be kind of focused on, or we'll be talking about today. But just kind of high level it for us. What does the industries look like? Like, how is IoT being used? And kind of just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we see IoT in all kinds of places in the built environment, right? So, just sort of starting on the outside, moving in, devices that might be sensor devices for utility companies, be it water utilities or power distribution, gas and electric, certainly in sort of solar arrays, all kinds of instrumentation related to the health and sort of actual ongoing resilience of our grid and of our water supply, et cetera. Drones, another great example, right? Just these sort of robotic capabilities that extend the sensory capabilities of a person, right? To get that bird's eye view and kind of extend beyond your where you are. And then all of that capability is definitely within the built environment when we start to get inside buildings, right? So we encounter capabilities ranging from precision GPS devices to other sort of tracking type devices to just a broad array of sensors and automation systems inside of buildings or other sort of built environments. So we're really starting to see a wide array of capability across a sort of huge spectrum, be it sort of just monitoring to actual direct observation to even sort of like direct interaction. Right. These sort of edge devices and the connectivity that they bring is pretty impressive.
Fantastic. And what are some of the biggest challenges that this space is kind of seeing or has kind of come up recently? And then that'll obviously tie into kind of the overall solution, which we can introduce here in a second. But just high level, the challenges and what we're kind of seeing to kind of set the stage there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think what we've seen for those of us that have been in the industry for a while is some of the things we were sort of calling out maybe a few years ago are really starting to get solved, and some challenges remain. So what's getting solved? Connectivity, right? So, the sort of movement from 3G to LTE 4G, and now this upcoming 5G transition, just the breadth of connectivity that you're starting to see is really starting to enable IoT scenarios in a way that we kind of knew a few years ago, maybe that's not possible in that particular environment, but now it definitely is becoming possible. And it's really changing and accelerating the adoption of technology in places where previously it was just kind of precluded. The flip side to that equation is that as we increase connectivity and we increase data gathering and we increase all of the sort of interaction that comes from that, data is just growing. I mean, it's just becoming incredible. And so the management of that data, as well as the management of those edge devices, just continue to be a challenge. And you're really starting to see some interesting solutions to that in terms of like, how do I grab that data? How do I make use of that data? How do I manage it and make sense of it? To the extent that I have a growing fleet of devices, how do I manage those devices? How do I actually update them? How do I make sure that they're running correctly? So there are just all kinds of sort of these good problems, if you will, as the adoption of these baseline technologies really start to proliferate.
Fantastic. So that brings me to kind of introducing the solution we want to showcase here today, which is the OnePlace software, and we'll talk about kind of what that's doing in the
Mhm.
space. But just highlight, just like kind of give us a quick overview of what it is and what the purpose of it is.
Yeah, our software is used in lots of scenarios, but typically it's used in either one or two sort of primary domains. One is you're building something. So you're building a road or a bridge or a pipeline or what have you. And you need to really bring together a large set of drawings and plans, as well as direct observations, and track progress related to that build. And that's a key scenario. Another scenario is that you already have an asset. Let's call it a transmission line or a gas line or roadway, what have you, and you need to maintain it. And these are long-lived assets. These assets are not something that lives 1 or 2 years. It's not even like 10 or 20 years. These are things that last 50 years, 100 years. And so being able to not only manage that asset, gather information related to the health and resiliency of that asset, and then make that information available to each individual person that encounters that asset at any given time. You're never sending the same technician or engineer to work on a power line day in and day out. That's just not realistic. And so that specialist who's arriving on site could be encountering that asset for the first time, that transmission
Sure.
tower for the first time.
Right.
But it's really beneficial if they understand the context relative to it. Was
Okay.
there work done on it recently? What was that work? Are there some known issues that I need to be aware of? How do I just get there? There's some just really basic questions. And the ability to share that information and that sort of historical knowledge is paramount. And that was really kind of where our software makes a big difference before you ever even sort of touch down and you're now doing your work for your day, much less making sure that information eventually flows back to the organization to get ready for the next job, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. I know one of the things that I try to do on this is talk a little bit or shift from just being super hypothetical conceptual of like what
Yeah.
a solution can actually do to like give some real world examples. So,
Mhm.
can you take us through a current deployment of this software in the real world? I know
Yeah.
you're not able to mention the company name, but just tell us a little bit about what the company does, the role they play in the space, what problem they were having, and then the kind of adoption process, and then all the way wrap it around to kind of what they're seeing now, given the deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, we work in sort of across the breadth of the built environment. What that means is oftentimes we work with public utilities, as an example, and taking a specific utility in mind. The truth is, for any player in that industry, it's a high compliance industry, meaning they're sort of delivering a must-have resource to all of us, energy.
Hmm.
That energy transmission and distribution comes with risk. And so there's a lot of compliance around managing that must-have resource, managing the information relative to it, and quite frankly, managing the safety of not only personnel, but just the general public around those assets. And so, when we work with a utility, any utility really, we have to be able to align to that high
Yeah.
compliance scenario. And so there's a
Right.
ton of information security that we have baked in to our product to make sure that we can deal with that information appropriately. And we deal with lots of different mixed information. So oftentimes these organizations, as I mentioned, that they're dealing with these assets for decades. So they'll have historical information about all of the work that's happened. going back years. They'll have maps and other sort of geographic assets to describe where their stuff is in the universe. And, has it changed? Has there been some reroutes? Has it extended over time? They'll have blueprints and designs for changes that they might want to make into the future as they start to think about the evolution of their overall utility. And then they have people, they have equipment that are not tied to, say, the transmission towers or the distribution towers, but they're out there in the real world. They're driving trucks, they're doing work, They have parts and materials with them. So there's a lot of information. It's a lot of mixed information. And you have to be really sensitive about, how all this information is managed. What we find often, and this might surprise your audience, is that a lot of this information, by the time it reaches the field, is in paper form. That's really kind of how we encounter these utility customers, is that there's rich digital information back at the office. Geographic information systems managing all of the sort of topography of where their utility is running and the maps to show where everything is. There's rich asset information in these large asset management systems that detail everything down to like the bolt inside of a transformer that's connected to a pole that's connected to a broader distribution network. There's all kinds of financial and jobs information in their enterprise resource planning system. So they have these like big enterprise systems tracking all kinds of stuff. You get down to a guy in a truck in a field somewhere standing under a power line, and he's probably got some paper. He's got a clipboard. He's got a paper form. He maybe has a paper map that told him like kind of where he needs to go. And so if that individual is always kind of starting from scratch, when they're, popping a manhole cover or they're looking at a transmission tower, one, it really just slows them down. It's just like they're having to kind of take all of their sort of observational skills and expertise and make use of it in that moment to kind of figure out what they're doing.
Right.
The other thing is that they're just marking all this down on paper in real time. Any observations they see, any recommendations of work that need to happen. Oftentimes there's differing conditions than what they expected. So they might go out there and think like, oh, there's going to be 2 transmission poles here, or I expect the turbine to be a manhole cover here because this is what my data tells me. They get out there. The reality is it's not that, right? It could have been that something got changed and not documented appropriately 5 years ago, whatever it might be. So they're having to adjust in real time. So what we directly encounter, let's say with a large scale West Coast utility, is their backlog of work isn't measured in months. It's measured in years, sometimes decades. I mean, like they just need and desire to move much, much faster. And it's this digital in the office to paper in the field, and then having to transcribe all that paper back to digital in the office, incredibly slow, right? And so that's where we come in, is that we integrate with all that digital space inside the office. We can bring in all of their digital maps and other GIS information. We can bring in all of their asset information. We can bring in all their old prior jobs information and their teams, right? And then we can make sure that that data is available to the person who's actually in the field. So they come with all that historical knowledge. They know exactly where they need to go to do their job for that day. They're making direct observations, just like the regular day job, using our software in the field.
Right.
And they can do that if they're connected to the internet. If they're not connected to the internet, no problem. But as soon as they do get connected again, all of that data flows back to the office. So there were inspection scenarios for underground gas lines and underground sewer lines, and a concern as to whether, does that gas line cross that sewer line? Is that creating a hazard?
Right.
In that particular case alone, we were taking a process that took 4 to 6 weeks to do that full sort of information turnaround. And we had it compressed down to a day, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And so when you translate that to decades of backlog, you really pull that number in. You really help these organizations catch up on what they need to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Super interesting. It's obviously a space. Well, I guess I would say it's a space that I don't have as much exposure to, but I know our audience finds a lot of interest in it, and number of our audience members working kind of connected to the space. For them out there who want to learn more and kind of dive in and kind of better understand what goes into it and how it's applicable to their business, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would always encourage everyone to visit our website. It's www.unearthlabs.com. We have an amazing blog. Please check that out. We cover actually a lot of these types of specific scenarios and case studies on work that we've done for various types of organizations. So there's a lot of information there that you can learn about the challenges out in the industry and how we're helping to solve them.
Fantastic. Last thing I'll ask you guys before we leave, how do you kind of see the this space evolving over the next number of months to, a couple years or so? Like, what are you most excited about, and what should people be thinking about in regards to how technology is really going to help kind of move this space forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that our customers are most excited about that we're hearing a lot of, particularly like underground gas lines or transmission lines, precision GPS. So we're getting a lot of requests for being able to get very, very precise about in-field engineering, meaning the person in the field is doing the engineering work, not some person with a big workstation back in the office. But
Right.
they need to be precise. And so the ability to tie software and great software that has engineering capabilities to precision GPS scenarios, really powerful, because now you have
Sure.
this almost like perfect representation back in the office.
Right.
It's very cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Very exciting stuff that you have going on over at Unearth, and I know our audience is getting a lot of value out of this. So really appreciate it, and look forward to having you back at some point to talk further.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the IoT Solution video series from us at IoT for All. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. If you have a potential solution or something in the space that you would love to showcase to our audience, please email me directly at ryan@iotforall.com. I'd be happy to discuss what it is that you have going on and find ways to get that out to our audience. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.